Okay. Hello, everyone. Hi, Enrico. Hi, Carla. How are you?
I'm good.
All right. So we're waiting for the premiere of our film that we filmed. When was it? Well, we filmed it in September of 22, and then came out. I think the premiere was in. It was finished in May of 23, but a few things have changed since then, I think. First of all, Carla, I know you've moved to the Netherlands. Can you tell us a little bit about it's something you spoke about in the film. Can you tell us something about how it happened? What made you really finally decide to take the decision to move out from Italy?
Yeah, I think we're a couple of things. First of all, I think my kids' education. I wanted them to be in a more, you know, um, it's a term that I don't really like, but I just realize is the only one that can really describe how I feel in terms of, citizenship, like in a more international environment with people having different experiences and speaking different languages and being exposed to, something that was not monocultural, I would say. So this was one of the decisions. The other one was that even if I grew up in a small town near Milan, I am a city girl. So I just wanted to have a little bit the charm and the possibilities that a city can offer you. And I think Amsterdam is a good compromise if you have kids, but also you want to have the city life.
I have another question. Was there something that triggered it? Like something that happened that you said, that's it, I'm moving away?
Yeah, I think I was waiting for my son out of school, and then I don't know, it was 10 degrees, but they couldn't go out because it was too cold for kids to play out, and they had to be inside, and then they were like watching TV for 1.5 hours because they couldn't go out because it was dirty and cold. And I said, okay, that's it. I just don't want my kids to live in this environment. I'm just gonna leave. I just can't. I just felt something inside me breaking.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can understand. I can understand that. So Enrico, how are you?
Thank you. I'm good.
Yeah. So you're there in Florence.
Yes, I am.
So I think a lot has happened on the international scene since we filmed the video and since it came out. So, um, we made the film back in September of 2022, and it was finished in May of 2023. But of course, a lot has changed since then. Carla, you've moved to Amsterdam, and even more significantly, and something I think that's important to Jews all over the world, the attacks on October 7th, 2023 happened. And then, of course, the following incursion into Gaza. Um, and I wanted to ask you just a little bit. I know it's a very inflammatory subject, um, but have you seen racism or anti-Semitism increase, at least in your environment, since the 7th of October?
Well, it shouldn't be an inflammatory subject, actually. It's pretty straightforward as I see it. It's definitely we live in kind of another world after this terrible year. And it's true that the situation has changed dramatically. Just for example, I've been, as you know, I'm have to I work with the Jewish community here in Florence, and I'm just out of dealing with the problems of some people that have been posting things about the need to exterminate all Jews, things that not I mean not in any uncertain terms, and so I'm just there with some trying to understand the strategy. But the situation has changed, and it feels to us basically here as if we have gone back some 20 or 30 years. All the work, or a lot of the work that we had been doing in these past decades, does seem not completely, but does seem to have kind of gone down the drain, unfortunately. Now, just to be clear, there's nothing anti-Semitic about being for peace and about demonstrating for the victims in Gaza and being against the war and criticizing Israel if one feels like that for the war. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a situation in which really the relationship with the Jewish community as an entity and Jews as people has somewhat changed, unfortunately. Not with everybody, not for everybody, but we are dealing daily with situation like people coming in the shul and saying, because they're delivering a set of books to the library and saying, I want to go away because this is the source of all evil. I've just entered the source of all evil. So it's things that we weren't used to seeing a few years ago, and it kind of the situation has kind of opened up to a different level of antagonism to Jews as a whole. That said, it's not as bad as it probably I've depicted it also today. There's also the other part of the picture, and I must say that I live in a town, Florence, where we are very much set onto creating an environment where dialogue and citizenship is something that is still, the top of the top priority. I'm having a very beautiful example of people coming in to this event that we have regularly every summer at Balagan Cafe, that we dedicated to peace and to talking with different communities and with different people that are involved with I'm having just next Thursday I'm interviewing there in the garden of the synagogue with the community and with people from the community. I'm interviewing a group of women for peace that have been demonstrating weekly all this year. So it's a very positive and encouraging situation in Florence, I must say. That said, I mean, it's a really feels a bit different from when we spoke when we last spoke, but we deal with that, and hopefully also hopefully first of all the war is going to end soon, and killings will finish on all sides, and those hostages that are still alive will be able to join their families, and killings will stop in Gaza, and we will be in a better situation, and hopefully this will also help us address better, some parts of the relationship between Jews and Italian society that weren't so evidently so settled, let's say.
Okay. No, that's a bit interesting because in Germany I feel kind of another sensation in that um, it seems like the German government is dealing with such a heavy guilt situation that no criticism of the Israeli government or of the situation in Gaza is allowed. And so it feels like I was in Italy, I guess, about 3 months ago, three weeks ago, and it seemed like being put into a completely different world. Here it feels a little bit oppressive, and that the situation, in a way, is being instrumentalized against Arabs and against foreigners.
That is true also here, I'm sure. Definitely from what I read, there's no comparison possible between the situation in Italy and in Germany as far as mainstream media and general, feeling, and also what I mean is generally how things are spoken about publicly. So it's really a different situation. Yet that is also the one of the big problems, and that I'm referring to the fact that the situation is being instrumentalized also against new immigrants, against the Muslim population as a whole. So this is a bit, and this is what I was referring to when I say that here in Florence we're still trying to fight against this kind of this pulling people's, I mean, using the situation, exploiting the situation for other political purposes. This doesn't mean that it's easy. I mean, it's been a complicated year also for the relationship between the Jewish and the Muslim community in Florence. But it's not a dramatic situation. We are still able to talk and to be together and walk together in some public demonstrations and be good neighbors and discuss even differences and difference in the political situation. I mean, it's a complex issue, the relationship between Jewish culture and Israel and the Muslim population now and some of the instances of radical religion extremism that is so. It's a complex issue. It is complex issues, but we are trying to do a kind of ground work on this.
Oh, wow. Thank you a lot. Now, Carla, we wanted to ask you a couple of questions also about you moved to Holland, and I think right afterwards, the right wing, you got a new, lovely right wing government. And do you find, has your situation changed in any way since that happened? How do you feel as a person of color?
Well, I think Amsterdam is a kind of a safe haven, so you don't really perceive that you have a right-wing government, I would say. Even if you see the result of the election in the same city, like they got, I think, 8%, so you don't really feel that, I would say. Plus, I think there is, yeah. No, I would say I live in a kind of a bubble inside a Bible Belt. It's a very different situation, I would say, that the one I was experiencing in Italy, where I would say racism, I would say like kind of systemic racism, or maybe how they like to call it, like unaware racism is much more spread, and is much more. I think they're just not as aware as they are here, especially in Amsterdam, I would say. So definitely my situation has improved. I feel much more integrated in the city, in the society. It's as funny as it can sound, there are more Black people, and this is also part of feeling part of the community. So you even my kids, I think they have more way of mirroring themselves also physically, and I think it's always important. But I wouldn't say the right wing really affected me as an inhabitant of the city, I would say.
Now, I wanted to ask you, have you experienced any racist incidents since you moved to Amsterdam, or your kids?
No, never happened to me.
That's
No.
amazing. And tell me about like one really positive experience that one of you has had since you moved.
I think there are like several experiences, and one of them that is very dear to me is the fact that kids here, since everybody's bilingual, trilingual, one of the first questions they ask each other is, which language do you speak? That I find very cool. So they just try a way to they just try to find the best way to communicate. Of course, everybody is speaking Dutch, but then there are like half Dutch, half Italian kids. There is a half Indian, half American kids whose father lived in Milan for 20 years, so he speaks like perfect Italian. It's also his gestures. And this mix of languages, experiences, it really makes me feel relieved, I would say. This is probably what I was looking for, and I couldn't find in a small town in Italy that I loved, but I felt that I wasn't really fitting.
No, I can understand that. Now, I wanted to ask, have you had any, have you seen the film again, and do you have any feelings about it, or have you heard anything from people who have seen it? Have you gotten any kind of You
I
know,
haven't seen it yet. I want to re-see it, but I was busy in other things, moving and stuff. But I really want to take some time, and now I have some time to rewatch it. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Too, I think it's a wonderful way of connecting to diversity and to deal with diversity from a cultural perspective, which I think is necessary, and is, I mean, I think it's a very important message to have. So thanks again for the endeavor. I mean, it's been wonderful being part of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys made it. I mean, I have something I can talk about, which is that when we had the screening here in Dresden, um, there was a discussion afterwards, but there was actually a German woman, a German Gentile woman, who held up her hand and said that she thought that she didn't understand why a black person was in there, and that she really wanted to see a film that talked about anti-Semitism, and that she really didn't understand the connection. I mean, for me, and that was a rather fiery moment. They didn't hold me back physically, but um, I just said to her, I said, well, um, the point is that people, it's not that anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism is another kind of racism, and that because most of the Jews in Europe were wiped out, we're not that visual, and we live in a population where people can't recognize us anymore. But a black person leaves their home black, and when they come back in the evening, they're still black, and they have to deal with racism every day, and that they're going through kind of a similar situation of what we went through, or what we're still going through. And talking about the premiere, I wish you guys had really been at the premiere, because the I mean, it wasn't a big hall, but it was full. There were about 40, 50 people there, which for an independent film screening is pretty unusually large. And that there was a panel of different women there at the end, and that it brought up a lot of questions. It got an incredibly positive response there. Um, and there were a lot of provocative questions about just the roots of racism. A lot of people, and it's interesting because it brings up a lot of facts that people just don't know about. They usually consider that the Shoah starts, that the massacres began in 1938, but it's a whole different story. Good. Any other thoughts?
Well, many, but
No. What would you like to say?
it's just as also as Enrico was saying, it's so complex to go through all of it. It's maybe I should write an essay and then read it out.
When you were asking Carla about a negative and a positive example, I was thinking about, if I can have 1 minute, a negative and positive example in one single story that is just kind of example of something that is interesting, I guess. I was dealing this few months ago with a young kid, a kid in school. He had been bullied by one of his classmates because he was recognizably Jewish. Everybody knew he was Jewish, and this other guy had started bullying him about being an assassin and the Israeli massacre and all that stuff. And they were really young kids. We're talking about less than 10 years old. I mean, they were really young kids. And so I was brought in because I'm the president of the Jewish community, and we tried to understand the situation, and came out that this guy who was bullying him was actually the son of immigrants coming from immigrant from a North African background. And so what we did, instead of going through, I don't know, other sources, since his family was Muslim, we called the imam, and he said, hey, you know his family? And he did. And so he went and talked with the family. Then we had them meet. We built a relationship between the two families and the two, and it came out, it was obviously, as with kids, something that had to do with total other problems that were focused into, that we're using words snatched from newscasts and public discussion just to hurt one another and to take out other grievances or other kind of difficult problems that had arisen in school. But it was very important, to go sideways and make this into a growth situation instead of a conflict. So I mean, it's not. I wish everything was so simple, but in this case, it was, and it was very, very, very positive, and it was a good way to address a very, very nasty situation. Just to my 2 cents of example.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you. It's interesting because it's a situation that I'm not even sure could happen in Germany, because everybody feels the need to be quiet. Also, within the community, there's kind of no space for discussion. But then again, I mean, here I feel very threatened by the far right. I mean, as a human being, but also as a Jew. But they wouldn't recognize me, you know. But when I go to Italy and when I see some of the things that Italians write on social media, there I feel threatened as well. It's just, it's amazing that the situation in two countries that are so close together could be so different. Any other things to say?
Maybe what I wanted to add is that, as also Rico was explaining, I think the most important action is understanding what's behind any kind of interaction that becomes, a conflict. And this means that you always have to listen, you always have to pay attention and not give, not think that everything is a given. And I think when sometimes we fall into this trap, then this kind of spirals start to happen again. I mean, it's so obvious, it's just see it in Europe everywhere. It's this is what's happening. Like the demographic is changing, the situation is changing, the economics parameters are changing. So it's just old resentment coming out in different ways. So I think it's very important to be vigilant and to talk and to understand as much as possible.
Wise words, Mrs. Bablagotto. No, I think that's true. And another thing I would add is that now that everyone basically has access to the news media or the news channel that reflects their own thoughts or their own prejudices, it's getting even harder to have a discussion.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really miss in Germany is this opportunity to have a discussion, because that doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous and slippery slope, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm told by the German government what is anti-Semitic and what is not anti-Semitic. On the other hand, you do feel a little safe, but that's not the way that my Arab friends feel. They certainly don't feel more safe in the situation. Anyway, well, now let's see the movie. Okay?
Right.
All right. I can't wait. And we'll see. Okay. Lots of love. Bye-bye. 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 Yeah, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
שם ישבנו גם בחינוך באזורנו
I remember very clearly the first time I felt normal, like nobody was looking at me. I was 15 and I went to London and finally I was like one of them.
Oh ja, Vergasung, so wie damals. Sowas und auch andere Kommentare, wie gesagt, mit dem Hitlergruß. Und einfach täglich.
Italy has a funny way of using the word, especially Tuscany, of using the word rabbino, rabbi, to mean somebody who's particularly not generous with his money. So this was very common.
I moved to Europe when I was very young, and I went to register in Amsterdam, and this was in 1982. The clerk said, what's your religion? And I said, I'm Jewish. And he said, you don't have to write that if you don't want to. And I said, it's fine. You can write that I'm Jewish. And when I got the document, he had left it out.
Durch die Zuschreibung gewisser negativer Attribute zu jüdischen Personen oder jüdischen Institutionen wird sich ja hier quasi politische, ökonomische Prozesse erklärt.
Bei aller Akzeptanz im 11. Jahrhundert hatten wir am Ende des 11. Jahrhunderts mit dem Pogrom, dem Kreuzzugspogrom. Das heißt, die Kreuzzugsteilnehmer sind hier in Worms eingefallen, aber auch in Speyer und in Mainz. Und in Worms und Mainz gab es Hunderte von Toten.
My name is Enrico Fink. I am a musician who deals in Jewish themes most of his life, and I'm also the president of the Jewish community of Florence in Italy.
So my name is Carla Nahadi Babeligotto. I am from Italy. I was born in the south in Puglia, but I grew up near Milan in a little town called Lodi, medieval city. And what else? I'm a singer. I sing everything from medieval music to contemporary.
Okay. Ja, also ich bin Leah Lautenschläger. Ich besuche die 9. Klasse, bin 16 Jahre alt und bin jüdisch und italienisch.
Ich bin Marco Siegmund, Referent für Öffentlichkeitsarbeit beim Bundesverband der Recherche- und Informationsstellen Antisemitismus.
My name is Avery Gosfield. I'm the director of the early multicultural music ensemble Lucidarium. One of the problems with early music is, even though we know that the common people and people of maybe different ethnic groups in Europe, they made music, we don't have really very much evidence of what they did because musical notation was really in the hands of the upper classes or the people that were very, very close to the big institutions. So these were mostly white Christian males. So we have these sources where we have text, but we really don't know what kind of music they set it to. And that's what I've been doing with Lucidarium, is to just try and put these things together. It's more forgery than actual authentic reproduction, but my idea is to try and let people know about the artistic expression of people in different ethnic groups today. I came to sort of an idea that was a darker concept, and this was something about crusade songs, which is a very, very beloved early music repertoire. These are the songs that, from the 11th, 12th, and 13th century, written by Christians in favor of the Crusades. And the problem with these is that they contain many, many anti-Jewish texts. And they deal a lot with this trope of the Jews having killed Jesus. And for a long time, these were performed without, with people just cutting out the anti-Judaic texts. Or they would put a little footnote in the program, or they would say, well, this is what people thought at the time, and we're sorry, but you know, it was harmless. But it actually wasn't harmless. The Christians that were on the crusade, rather than go all the way to Jerusalem to murder non-Christians, they decided that they would kill the people in their midst, which was the Jews, and they killed many people in Cologne. But the most famous massacres are the ones that happened in what we call the Schum cities. So that's Speyer, Worms, and Mainz. And they really decimated the population there. So this is where the concept of sort of these microaggressions, in other words, these anti-Jewish texts that in the 20th century and 21st century were kind of considered harmless, you know, they turned into macroaggressions, and the populations, the Jewish populations in 2 of the 3 cities were wiped out.
Microaggressions are all these little manifestations that I would say are almost unconscious in the people who are perpetrating them. So they don't feel the awareness of aggressing someone else because it has different hair, a different skin color. They just think that it's okay to just keep asking about why they are so different from everything they saw before.
Defining anti-Semitism is a very complex thing, and there have been tons of ink used for the subject. But basically, for me, anti-Semitism is a hatred towards Jews. So, in a very simple form, it can take very different forms, and it does. And it is something that is, unfortunately, has been part of our European society for the past 2,000 years or more, and reappears at regular intervals in different forms throughout and in different parts of society. Defining microaggressions and macroaggressions is something that is very dependent on the context, the situation, and the moment in history. If I think about my experience, it's difficult to define anything as a macroaggression when my father, his family had been persecuted and exterminated during the Shoah just 30 years before I was born. So with respect to that, there is no macroaggression even thinkable in nowadays Italy.
Ich würde eine Mikroaggression so definieren, dass wenn ich mit jemandem rede und der Person sage, dass ich jüdisch bin und die dann sagt, echt, du siehst gar nicht jüdisch aus. Das ist ein gutes Beispiel für eine Mikroaggression, jetzt ganz spezifisch. Ich habe selber Mikroaggressionen erlebt, in der Schule häufig und auch außerhalb der Schule. Und das waren einfach immer dumme Kommentare von Leuten. Ja, zum Beispiel hat auch mal jemand einen Hitlergruß gemacht in der Klasse. Ja, ich habe das öfter erlebt, war nicht schön.
Wir haben 11 Meldestellen in verschiedenen Bundesländern und nehmen auch bundesweit antisemitische Vorfälle entgegen und dokumentieren diese und haben dabei einen ganz starken betroffenen Fokus. Und was für uns nochmal die Arbeit anders macht, ist, dass wir auch Vorfälle entgegennehmen, die unterhalb der Strafbarkeitsgrenze liegen, also auch Beleidigungen und antisemitische Äußerungen, die normalerweise in polizeilichen Statistiken nicht auftauchen würden.
Probably when I was a kid, like a pre-teenager or in school, where people were telling me that I had like a slightly bigger ass than the other girls because, I mean, I'm an Afro woman, let's say, so we are shaped just differently. Or were they teasing me because of my hair? They were calling me Medusa, actually. This is something I remember. It's the first thing I remember because I had these long braids and my hair was not straight. So for them was a major asset to insult me. The hair thing is coming over and over again. And my life, people touching my hair without asking permission, people asking me to touch my hair. I mean, would you ever ask a white person, can I touch your hair? Yeah.
Some things can be overtly aggressive. I mean, I can think of statements or acts which are intended to offend somebody or to give offense or to be aggressive, to be hostile. And others are, and these would be the microaggressions in my definition, are things that are done with the idea of being funny, with the idea of being even complicit with the victim, and with a wink towards a possible audience, or in any case, a wink towards the person who is object of the aggressive comment or whatever.
Ja, also zum Beispiel einmal war es so, dass ich war mit Freunden unterwegs und ich wollte dann nach Hause. Und dann habe ich Tschüss gesagt und habe gesagt, ich gehe jetzt. Und dann hat ein Freund gesagt, wohin? Nach Auschwitz. Ich habe ihm gesagt, dass ich das nicht okay finde, dass ich das nicht will. Und er hat sich sofort entschuldigt, er hat sich total geschämt. Er hat mir danach auch nochmal eine SMS geschrieben, meinte, es tut mir wirklich leid, ich schäme mich, ich weiß überhaupt nicht, was ich sagen soll.
And this is pretty common, and it has been as I grew up. Italy has a funny way of using the word, especially Tuscany, of using the word rabbino, rabbi, to mean somebody who's particularly not generous with his money. So this was very common, and very common to be done in my presence or even towards me, not even as a real macroaggression, but just as something also with the idea of the person doing it that he's a friend, you know, I can say this, I can make this joke because, you know, we're friends, you know that I'm not really racist, it's just a funny joke. This would be an example of microaggression.
Dann haben wir natürlich Verfolgungen in der Mitte des 14. Jahrhunderts, als wir hier Pestausbrüche haben. Man die Juden schlimm verfolgt, einen Sündenbock braucht und ihnen vorwirft, dass sie eben die Brunnen vergiftet hätten. Da gibt es viele Tote in der Judengasse wegen dieser Pestverfolgungen.
Also die Corona-Pandemie in Bezug auf Antisemitismus hat für uns noch einmal gezeigt, dass Antisemitismus in der Tat ein sehr dynamisches, historisch wandelbares Phänomen ist und sich immer mit den politischen und gesellschaftlichen Krisen verändert. Und dementsprechend haben wir auch gemerkt, dass gerade zu Beginn der Corona-Pandemie und dem Beginn der staatlichen Maßnahmen zur Eindämmung eine sehr große Anzahl von Vorfällen ergeben hat, die direkt damit in Bezug standen. Also 2021 war es zum Beispiel so, dass über die Hälfte der Vorfälle, die bei uns eingegangen sind, in irgendeiner Art und Weise in Bezug zur Corona-Pandemie gestanden haben.
Also ich bin mir ziemlich sicher, dass diese Mikroaggressionen viel mehr geworden sind. Also früher, bis vor 2 oder 3 Jahren, habe ich noch nie in meinem ganzen Leben Antisemitismus überhaupt erlebt. So, und ja, es ist vor allem dieses Schuljahr ist das sehr, sehr angestiegen.
Man sieht, denke ich schon, dass gerade in Phänomenen der Krise ein Deutungsmuster immer wieder das war, die Schuld an diesen oder die Erklärungsursache bei Jüdinnen und Juden oder jüdischen Institutionen oder Gruppen, die man als besonders jüdisch ausmacht, festzustellen. Also Prozesse, die Personen als besonders komplex vorkommen, die besonders unverständlich sind, werden auf Jüdinnen und Juden zurückbezogen. Also es wird Jüdinnen und Juden unterstellt, sie würden die Wirtschaft kontrollieren, sie würden die Politik kontrollieren. Sie hätten also quasi eine Art unheimliche Macht inne, um damit gesellschaftliche Phänomene falsch zu erklären und Hass und Gewalt und auch Mord gegenüber Jüdinnen und Juden dann wiederum zu rechtfertigen. Was für uns auch mal wichtig wäre, weil wir damit auch eine Abgrenzung gegenüber dem Rassismus vornehmen würden. Also sagen würden, im rassistischen Stereotypen, im Rassismus ist oft eher eine Abwertung verbunden des anderen, während im Antisemitismus eigentlich viel mehr die Aufwertung liegt. Also Personen werden als besonders übermächtig und kontrollierend dargestellt.
I have to say I've never been in a situation where I was feeling fragile or powerless because of how I look. On the contrary, people tend to be intimidated or curious. It's very interesting, yeah. I think they start to be upset when you are asking them, why are you posing all these questions to me? Why are you asking me about my hair? Why do you want to touch my hair? Then they say, no, I'm not racist.
Viele Interviews, die wir mit Betroffenen geführt haben, haben herausgestellt, dass diese tiefgreifende Erfahrung von Antisemitismus für sie verändert, wie sie ihren Alltag dem gegenüber gestalten, ob sie einerseits, also eine Abwägung vornehmen, ob sie einerseits ihre jüdische Identität nach außen darstellen wollen oder ob sie quasi andererseits sagen, dass dies für sie ein Sicherheitsrisiko ist. Und das führt natürlich einerseits zu Konflikten mit der eigenen Identität oder mit den verschiedenen jüdischen Identitäten und es führt auch zu Konflikten zum Beispiel in familiären Umfeldern.
The way I cope with it is just surrounding myself of the people who I feel that are not kind of threat to me. What I used to do in the past, it was cover my body more. Now I realize it. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was covering myself more, like trying to be more invisible. Yeah, I was covering more myself, especially when I was a teenager. I remember this. I was trying to look more like a boy. This was something I used to do.
There's a tendency to look at persecution of the Jews as just at the Shoah. But if we go back to 1096, with these extremely important massacres, then we're showing that it just has a very, very long history. The other point with having modern people talk about their own experiences, also non-Jews, is to show that these kind of attitudes just keep on going. They really never stop. So we have this kind of constant chain that comes back and forth, where Jews are tolerated and then murdered. And there's actually a very interesting piece. It's called Matzur Ba'ata Ha'ir, but its besiegers came to the town. And it's called the Purim of Worms. So Purim is normally a holiday that celebrates when it looked like all was lost, but the Jews come through. And this was the case here because the Jews and the Christians in the town, they united against the invaders, and they beat them all.
Ab dem 15. Jahrhundert haben wir Judenordnungen und sagen wir mal, die Freizügigkeit der Blütezeit der Schumgemeinden wird durch Judenordnungen eingeschränkt. Man darf zu bestimmten Tageszeiten, Festzeiten der Christen, also christlichen Feiertagen, die Judengasse nicht mehr verlassen. Man muss zu einer bestimmten Uhrzeit abends da sein, dann wird die Judengasse abgeschlossen. Man wird beschränkt auf den Handel mit altem Material, Pfandhandel, von den Sozialunruhen. Anfang des 17. Jahrhunderts habe ich schon gesprochen, wo man einfach aus Neid, sagen wir mal, auf die Mitbewerber, also auf die wirtschaftliche Konkurrenz, die Juden für ein Jahr aus der Stadt vertreibt. Und dann haben wir im 19. Jahrhundert nochmal dieses Jahrhundert, wo wir auch mit Ferdinand Eberstadt den ersten jüdischen Bürgermeister von Deutschland haben, hier in Worms. Das heißt, man hat jetzt das volle Bürgerrecht. Und das im Grunde vor der Machtergreifung durch die Nationalsozialisten, wo man zwar immer natürlich schon diesen Antisemitismus spürt, dieser Antisemitismus, gerade vor dem Hintergrund dieses 19. Jahrhunderts, das war wohl auch sehr schwer vorstellbar, dass man Menschen jedes Lebensrecht abspricht.
Ja, also zum Beispiel, was mir jetzt auch einfällt, mal im Bio-Unterricht, es ging irgendwie um Gas, irgendwas mit einem Wort mit Gas, so. Und dann hat jemand zu mir gesagt, oder nicht mal zu mir, sondern einfach so vor sich hin so ein bisschen gebrabbelt, ja, so wie damals oder sowas, halt, oh ja, Vergasung, so wie damals, sowas. Und auch andere Kommentare, wie gesagt, mit dem Hitlergruß. Und einfach täglich, jeden Tag gibt es immer solche Kommentare, die in so eine Richtung gehen, die gar nicht groß sind, die halt so mikro sind, sage ich mal. Aber die halt einen Tag für Tag, es wird dann immer mehr und dann irgendwann ist es halt einfach so, es belastet einen schon. So.
I actually decided to move away from the career that I had envisioned for myself since I was a kid. I wanted to be an astronomer and I studied for that. But I decided to drop off of that and to start trying to earn my life as a musician, basically because my grandmother had died exactly the day that I sent in my final dissertation. And I remember this fact, this conscious thought of all the that part of the history of my family kind of disappearing, and I wanted to work on that. And from then on, the work on memory and on the show has been an integral and very strong part of my career, of my artistic endeavors. Let's say I learned Yiddish. That was a language that my grandfather would speak with his family, but I obviously never could hear, and I learned it, or I listened to it from Plasmatics or Brave Old Word or American bands, and it was interesting for me that my great grandfather came from a very Eastern European background, but he became a Hazan in Italy, singing totally different music, and so the musical difference between his background and what he was doing became something that moved me to work a lot on Italian Jewish synagogue traditions, and that kind of made me into what I am now.
So during COVID, unfortunately, I had to not be a singer, but I had to teach at school. I was teaching Cambridge curriculum for music theory. And in particular, I was listening with my students to music, from Mozambique. I was seated among the students, and one of the other professors came into the room, and he just shouted, as it was the most like normal and enjoyable thing. He shouted "musica di negri," that in Italian means music for niggers, and I felt the room just froze. Then I went to the principal, and the principal was kind of telling me that he was a good person anyway, that he does a lot of things in the school, that she was sure that it was not intentional. When I actually understood that the principal was not doing anything, or she had no will to do anything about it because it was just a little accident, I thought maybe I should just go back to Northern Europe where I felt that I was kind of more integrated.
Also ich habe mich mal wegen ein paar mehr Kommentaren psychisch bedroht gefühlt, aber nicht so, dass ich Angst hatte, dass die Person gleich gewalttätig wird oder sowas, sondern einfach wirklich psychisch, dass ich das nicht ausgehalten habe. Irgendwann einfach, dass die ganze Zeit solche Kommentare gefallen sind in der Schule während des Unterrichts, und ich hatte das Gefühl, überhaupt niemand bemerkt das, überhaupt niemand sagt was, so, und bin da so richtig in meinem Loch versunken. Die meisten Lehrer bekommen das nicht mit, oder es sind Lehrer, wo die Schüler wissen, dass die da nichts sagen werden. Also dort, wenn sowas da passiert, dann habe ich da keine Leute, die mich oder jemand anderen in Schutz nehmen würden.
Das Problem hier ist ja gerade, dass in einer nicht-jüdischen Mehrheitsgesellschaft nicht alle Personen gleichermaßen für Antisemitismus sensibilisiert sind und dann auch annehmen, dass vielleicht antisemitische Vorfälle doch eigentlich nur Banalitäten darstellen. Aber für die Personen, wie uns aus Berichten bekannt ist, stellen auch kleinere Vorfälle eigentlich tiefgreifende Erfahrungen dar, die ihr eigenen Selbstbezug langfristig verändern. Und daraus erwächst im schlimmsten Fall eben soziale Isolation und Rückzug einzelner Personen und auch das Gefühl dass sie alleingelassen sind. Was uns Personen berichten, die von antisemitischen Vorfällen betroffen sind in der Öffentlichkeit und die hier keinerlei Unterstützung erfahren, also zum Beispiel in einer vollen Bahn, in der Personen antisemitisch beleidigt werden, aber keiner der Umstehenden schreitet ein, hilft ihnen oder zeigt sich solidarisch mit ihnen, ist, dass gerade dieses Alleingelassenwerden für die Personen eine große Belastung ist und oft sogar noch schlimmer ist als der eigentliche antisemitische Vorfall.
I grew up in a family that was very strongly touched by the Shoah. My father's family, 12 people, counting only close relatives. I mean, his father, his uncles, and first cousins. 12 people died in Auschwitz, and so his whole family was obliterated. And this was something that was very much present. I remember that there's a story that is told about me, which I'm not particularly proud of, is that at 5 I came back from playing with kids in my block, and saying, "Mama, but this guy and this other guy, don't know who Hitler was. We were 5, so it was kind of normal. And for me, it was kind of a defining thing. My parents were very open with me reading anything, even books that were not for kids, since I was very small. The only book that was really ever hidden from me was the Diary of Anne Frank, because they were afraid that would be in some way difficult for me to read.
My father moved to Italy in 1973, so I think he was one of the 5 guys in the whole country. He was black and he moved to southern Italy. And southern Italy is kind of unique, I would say. And I was always very impressed by the fact that my mother's family just accepted my father as, just a good person, normal person. He wasn't. My grandma wasn't really thinking about the fact that he was black man. But my father had difficulties. For example, he couldn't really have a career in the university because he wasn't really told, but it was obvious that like a black man in the university was something very odd. And I have to say, we never really talked about it at home. I remember a couple of times telling him about someone commenting about my skin color, and he was saying, "Oh, he was just shrugging, yeah, okay, yeah, you're black, whatever." He wasn't really going deep into the emotional impact that this can have on a child.
Nachdem mir es richtig schlecht ging wegen diesen ganzen Mikroaggressionen, habe ich das meiner Familie erzählt, also meinem Vater und meinem Bruder. Meine Mutter war zu der Zeit nicht da. Dann habe ich so mit denen darüber diskutiert. Die waren nicht anderer Meinung an sich, aber die haben, sage ich mal, in dem Moment nicht das gesagt, was ich hören wollte. Einfach so, oh, das ist ganz schrecklich und oh Gott, wie geht's dir und sowas. Denke ich, wollte ich in dem Moment hören. Aber das haben sie nicht, weil und ich habe dann irgendwann verstanden, dass die sowas noch nicht erlebt haben. Ich weiß nicht genau, ob ich mich jetzt anders fühle als in meiner Kindheit, aber mir ist es jetzt bewusster, wie ich bin. Mir ist bewusster, wie ich mich identifiziere. Und dadurch denke ich schon, dass ich meine Abgrenzungen zu den Leuten, die ich kenne, mache. Aber ich fühle mich nicht als was Besonderes oder anders im negativen im negativen Sinne.
Jetzt im konkreten Beispiel, was bedeutet es, wenn ich einen antisemitischen Vorfall mitbekomme, zum Beispiel in der Bahn, im Bus oder auf der Straße, dann würden wir sagen, sprechen Sie die Person an, seien Sie offensiv solidarisch, unterstützen Sie die Person lautstark und zeigen Sie auch Widerspruch dagegen, dass hier Antisemitismus geäußert wird. Das bedeutet natürlich nicht, dass man sein eigentliches Leib und Leben in Gefahr bringen soll. Also sollte es zu schweren Übergriffen kommen, raten wir immer dazu, die Polizei zu rufen oder in der U-Bahn zum Beispiel den Notknopf zu drücken oder den Sicherheitsdienst zu rufen. Aber wichtig ist, dass den Personen gezeigt wird, sie sind hier nicht alleine.
One very, very important part of this project was to show how microaggressions can really result in macroaggressions. And I think using an artistic mode to do this is very important because someone goes to a concert with their guard down, They're not expecting to learn anything, they're just expecting to hear some beautiful music. And in the same time, we get the message across.
Auf und ab in 1000 Jahren, davon spricht eben auch dieser extremerhalten jüdische Friedhof. Deshalb habe ich auch immer gesagt, man kann das ablesen. Wie in einem Archiv von den Dokumenten haben wir hier mit den Grabsteininschriften Dokumente von diesem Auf und Ab in fast 1000 Jahren jüdischen Lebens.
Also ich finde, es ist wichtig, dass die Leute, denen sowas widerfährt, zu sich stehen und auch wenn sie das nicht können, das ist natürlich nicht leicht, dann sollten sie sich Hilfe holen, weil das ist wichtig, dass man gegen sowas aufsteht. Das ist sehr wichtig.
I don't know, sometimes I'm really frustrated, but in general I like to do things, I like to think that there are more positive things than bad things, so I don't really struggle, I have to say.